antiarrhythmic drug. Over to you, Dr. Chetan.
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction. I think without delaying, we'll just start with the presentation.
Sure, sir.
Okay, yeah. Good evening, everyone, all the attendees and the panelists. So today's topic is meglitine, an unexplored antiarrhythmic drug. So why meglitine is important and what is the role of meglitine in the patients of ventricular tachycardia? And what about the drug which is completely unexplored by many of our senior physicians, many of our even by the cardiologists? Let's start with a case scenario rather than directly jumping about the discussion and about the theoretical issues. This was the case which I just came across during my fellowship days of electrophysiology in 2018. So she was a 56-year-old woman. She had palpitation and breathlessness for last 2 days only. The ECG of suggested wide QRS tachycardia. Will go through the ECG and no comorbidities, no any cardiac history in the past, nothing. So this was the presentation of the ECG. Patient had a sudden onset palpitation. As you can see, it's a wide QRS tachycardia, LBB morphology with right axis, and you can easily see the P wave is walking through. So it was a AV dissociation. So it was just a ventricular tachycardia. So patient of hemodynamically stable. The resident at the casualty gave IV amiodarone bolus and the sinus rhythm was restored. The patient of admitted for the further evaluation. The echo suggestive of dilated cardiomyopathy with severe LV dysfunction. To rule out the etiology, we did the angiography. It was suggestive of normal coronaries. And eventually we did a cardiac MRI suggestive of biventricular inflammatory cardiomyopathy with extensive fibrosis, the ejection fraction of around 30% and RV function of also impaired. So we thought of viral myocarditis and started on beta blocker and amiodarone, and let's give a chance. Even after on beta blocker and amiodarone, the patient developed again a wide QRS tachycardia, which was of a different morphology as compared to the first tachycardia, which was a LBB morphology. This was a RBBB morphology with a right axis and AV dissociation of still there. IV lignocaine we use in the ICU to revert the episode. Patient again had a recurrent VT episode. We have to electively cardiovert with a 100 joule DC shock. We changed to propranolol, being a little bit novel beta blocker in the recent studies, along with the amiodarone, and a provisional diagnosis of kept as a acute myocarditis with pleomorphic VT with LV dysfunction. Because of the amiodarone, there was a drug-induced prolonged QT, so we have to stop the amiodarone. Patient still had a slowly ongoing VT at the rate of 120, 130 like that. So we tried for a ventricular overdrive pacing with the help of temporary pacing wire. Again, we tried for a thoracic epidural anesthesia by giving a bupivacaine directly epidurally, but both the attempts were futile. As patient of having severe sinus bradycardia with the rate of 30 per beats per minute, and it was refractory to atropine, we put a temporary atrial pacing with the help of a catheter to put into the coronary sinus. We thought there are multiple morphologies of VT, so catheter ablation won't be a good choice. So because of a poor efficacy, the catheter ablation was abandoned. Finally, we planned for a minimal invasive bilateral thoracic sympathectomy to cut down the sympathetic supply. And after that, we started with the patient with tablet meglitine. And slowly, when the QT was normalized, we added with a very low dose of amiodarone. To our wonder, in next 3 days, the trio of a sympathectomy with meglitine with a load of amiodarone made the VT completely infrequent. After around 48 hours of a VT-free interval, after the subsiding of a VT storm, we implanted a dual chamber ICD with the atrial pacing of 70 beats per minute. Optimal dose of amiodarone was added, and beta blocker and meglitine could be given and discharged in a stable condition. So this was a case of a VT storm. In the patient without an implantable cardiac defibrillator, that is without an ICD, the electrical storm is defined as 2 or more hemodynamically stable VT within 24 hours of duration, or a VT recurring soon after or within 5 minutes of the termination of another VT. The sustained or non-sustained VT resulting in a total number of ventricular ectopic beats greater than the sinus beat in a 24 hours period is also one of the definition of an electrical storm. If the patient is having VT, then 3 or more appropriate therapy in the period of 24 hours, whether in the form of shock or anti-tachycardia pacing, is enough. So what is the clinical syndrome for the electrical storm? There is always an anatomical substrate, which is a vulnerable substrate, either in form of structural heart disease or a scarring due to the MI, which has been affected by a triggered event like a VPC or a electrolyte imbalance, which triggers the electrical storm. The VT morphologies can be a monomorphic VT, which can be sustained or non-sustained, or incessant VT, or a VT storm, or a polymorphic VT, or a torsive depointase, or a bidirectional VT. We know almost around 75% of the VT, the etiology is a coronary artery disease or a ischemic heart disease. The remaining 15% comes to the cardiomyopathies like a dilated cardiomyopathy, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or a ARVD, that is a arrhythmogenic RV cardiomyopathy. Then comes the inherited syndrome like a long QT, Brugada, CPVT, or even early repolarization, and very rarely the others and valvular heart disease. So whenever a patient comes to you with a ventricular tachycardia, you have to evaluate the patient in detail. You have to see for a prior diagnosis of any structural heart disease, what are the symptoms, what are the risk factors, significant family history of syncope, and then get a ECG, echo, angio, and a cardiac MRI done sequentially. The VT can be in a patient of structurally normal heart, like a idiopathic VT, which is either outflow tract VT, fascicular, or a papillary muscle VT, or arrhythmic syndrome like a Brugada, long QT, short QT, or a catecholaminergic polymorphic VT. Or it can be due to underlying structural heart disease like a ischemic cardiomyopathy or a non-ischemic like a idiopathic or a ARVD or a HCM or Farquhar or Chagas. So talking about the things which we want to discuss now is what are the treatment options for VT? Either a medical treatment like antiarrhythmic drugs, ablation, catheter or a surgical base, or a device therapy. So why to treat and how to treat? The management strategies include, first of all, the correction of a reversible causes like ischemia, fluid overload, or electrolyte imbalance, early pharmacological sympathetic blockage, deep sedation, antiarrhythmic drugs. If the patient is having ICD, reprogram the ICD to minimize the shock, neuroaxial modulation, and cut down of a sympathetic activity with the help of bilateral sympathectomy and a catheter ablation. So antiarrhythmic drugs, they are a first line of management, and they are inexpensive and a rapidly effective treatment model which we have. ICD can be implanted in a secondary prevention of a VT or VF, or even a primary prevention with a ischemic or a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy. Catheter ablation can be planned in a patient of a recurrent idiopathic VT or a VT storm, and sympathetic denervation reduces the VT burden and the frequency of a ICD shock in the patient of refractory VT. So we know the Vaughan-Williams classification, the drugs which are available: amiodarone, lidocaine, metoprolol, mexvilitine, procainamide, Futalol. So why mexvilitine? It is an approved drug for the treatment of a ventricular arrhythmia. The US FDA has already approved the drug for the treatment of a VT. The Drug Controller Government of India has indicated the treatment for the patient of ventricular arrhythmia and ectopic beats, such as those found after MI or after the ischemic heart disease, for the arrhythmia induced by the drug, or for the idiopathic antiarrhythmic effects. The 2017 AHA guideline has already depicted mexvilitine is among the recommended antiarrhythmic drugs for the prevention or for the treatment of ventricular tachycardia. The EHRA guideline and the APHRS, the Asia Pacific Heart Rhythm Society, have recommended as a class 2B indication for a symptomatic non-sustained VT, or as a class 2A indication in the patient of a structurally heart disease or having the recurrent VT in addition to ICD or ablation therapy. So the most important thing, it is a class 1B antiarrhythmic, which is a sodium channel blocker. The mechanism is similar to the lidocaine, that is IV lignocaine, which we regularly use, but it is an orally active drug. It inhibits the inward sodium current, reducing the phase 0. The site of action is usually Purkinje fiber. For the sake of the crowd, I'm not going in details about the electrophysiological properties of a mexvilitine, which is an oral congener of a lidocaine only. But to be noted, it has a very minimal effect on a cardiac impulse generation and a propagation. It has no development of second degree or a third degree AV block, and no change in the QRF or a QT interval. So overall speaking, it has no effect on a SA node. It has no effect on a AV nodal refractory period. The PR interval doesn't change. There is no widening of a QRS, and there is no widening of a QT interval. For mexiletine, it is a no significant effect on the hemodynamic or a very less effect on a decrease in the cardiac output. No any significant negative inotropic effect. There is no significant change in the blood pressure and the pulse rate. The absorption is mainly via the GI tract 90% of the time. The distribution is 50 to 60% of the time plasma protein, and metabolism, unlike lidocaine, it's a fast metabolism is low. The elimination is 10% excreted unchanged via the kidneys. The dosage should be individualized as per the patient profile and patient substrate. The administration with the food is recommended. Usually it is said that initiation with the 200 milligram every 8 hourly when rapid control of arrhythmia is not essential. The dose may be adjusted 50 to 100 mg increment up or down. So what it has been recommended that for the rapid control of tachyarrhythmia, loading dose should be 400 milligram followed by 200 mg TDS. But in the day-to-day practice, when the rapid control is not needed, rather than 200 mg TDS, we usually start with the 50 mg TDS because non-compliance of a patient or a loss to follow, and then gradually we increase to 100 mg TDS or a 200 mg TDS like that, and even more. In the patient with a cardiogenic shock or a pre-existing second degree or third degree AV block, the drug is contraindicated. Even the reversible GI or nervous system adverse reaction like a lightheadedness, tremor for upper GI distress are quite common. So to manage the sustained monomorphic VT, if the patient is hemodynamically unstable, go with the ACLS guideline, give a DC cardioversion. If patient is hemodynamically stable, get an ECG done, get a brief history quickly. If any issue about the structural heart disease, cardiovert the patient, or go for the drugs like amiodarone, sotalol, or mexiletine. Unfortunately, procainamide is not available with us. If the VT is getting terminated, then evaluate the patient. If not getting terminated with the help of the drugs, go for a cardioversion. If we have a verapamil sensitivity like a fascicular VT or outflow tract tachycardia, go ahead for an IV beta blocker or IV calcium channel blocker accordingly. Usually these drugs are effective. If not, then you have to go ahead with a cardioversion again. For idiopathic VT or for the outflow tract VT, you can even go ahead with a catheter ablation as a treatment of choice. So to summarize, the mexiletine is indicated in a sustained ventricular arrhythmia. The agent is of moderate potency and appreciable safety. It is safe in a patient with a long QT, reversible non-lethal adverse effect, safe in the patient of LV dysfunction. Class 2 recommendation by the guideline for the management of the VT can be used as an add-on drug to amiodarone, sotalol, or even other beta blocker in the patient with an implantable cardiac defibrillator. So the management of VT involves all the three modalities: the medical management with the help of drugs, the device interrogation of the ICD, and the ablation if needed, or very often a hybrid therapy. The treatment of VT can be a challenge and needs to be individualized. In the patient with a structural heart disease or a high-risk polymorphic VT, ICD is the first line of treatment. Catheter ablation should be considered in the patient with a recurrent symptomatic idiopathic VTs or a second line treatment in the VT with a structural heart disease. The medical therapy is acceptable for a minimally symptomatic idiopathic VT or the low risk group of a polymorphic VT. I think we can conclude here. Thank you. I think someone has raised the hand. They can just write down the question in the chat box so that I can try to answer up to my level. Dr. Piyush has raised the hand, I guess. I will just request him to write down the message in the chat box so that I can answer his query if at all. Preeti, is there any question?
Yes,
from,
sir, yes.
Yeah.
Any questions from any participant?
Yeah, I already told them to write down in the chat box because someone has just raised the hand during the case presentation itself before starting with the discussion of mexiletine. If there are any
Okay.
question, I can try to answer. If not, then we can wait for 2 to 5 minutes and then we can conclude.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Sir.
Yeah. Okay. I'm available here only. We'll wait for 2 minutes and then we can conclude. Okay.
Sure. Sir.
Yeah. Great. There is one question in the chat box by Dr. Parag sir, that how effective is the mexiletine in the post-infarct with the LV dysfunction patient as compared to the amiodarone or ICD? Sir, as compared to the amiodarone, it's equally effective to give the mexiletine. If the patient's VT has responded to IV Zylocard, that is IV lignocaine, then definitely you can start the patient with the mexiletine. And as per the guidelines, you are also quite aware that implanting the ICD in the patient immediately post-infarct, at least till 35 to 40 days, is not recommended. And even after giving the ICD, even I have a couple of patients which are doing quite well after implantation of the ICD with a low dose amiodarone with the mexiletine and in addition to the beta blocker. The pharmacological action of the mexiletine is very important because it is electrophysiologically quite neutral. The second question I'm just answering in that only, that why this molecule is lag behind the amiodarone. The molecule is never lag behind. The crowd is not been explored the drug mexiletine. For the people, for the electrophysiologists who are using the mexiletine day in day out, for them the IV Zylocard and and oral mexiletine are more important than giving the IV amiodarone. We never try to go ahead directly with the IV amiodarone in the patient of if the patient comes to you with a ventricular tachycardia in the casualty. Just take a brief history and try for IV Zylocard, which is more electrophysiologically neutral. So it is not a molecule that you can say it is lag behind the amiodarone, but it is a completely unexplored molecule. If you come across the electrophysiologist or the group of those people who are directly dealing with the VTs day in day out, what we used to tackle in our residency days and electrophysiology fellowship days with Dr. Lokhandwala. So the molecule we are using day in and day out, and especially after implanting the ICD, it's one of the choice of molecule which we go ahead with. So it's not like it is lag behind the amiodarone. Amiodarone is a bread and butter for a ventricular tachycardia, for even for the GPs, physicians, and the cardiologists, no doubt in that. But adding up the mexiletine in such a kind of patient, because when you come across the QT prolongation, the drug induced because of the amiodarone, then you are again stuck. What to do? Again, go either with the oral beta blocker, change the beta blocker to either the propranolol or a sotalol, or just wait and watch like that. So even in such a patient, the giving the oral mexiletine is quite beneficial. The next question from sir itself is why we need to up titrate the dose. I mean, what happens if you start with the 200 TDF or 400 TDF? As per my experience of a mexiletine in last 4 to 5 years, we never start with a 200 TDF. We always go slowly with 50 mg TDF, because the one of the main reason why we organized this presentation of that mexiletine was one of the monopoly of only one brand only, which was available all over the India. Even my couple of patients, the mexiletine was not available, so I have to ship them on the oral phenytoin. So such a kind of patient, now we can start with this newly launched molecule, and to start with a 50 milligram TDF is a different option to go ahead, and gradually we can up titrate to 100 milligram TDF or a 200 TDF. Even in my experience, I have never come across to start with a 400 milligram TDF. One again, an anonymous attendee has raised one question that in the case of a dilated cardiomyopathy with a AR, so I think he might have to write atrial fibrillation with a fast ventricular rate and a hemodynamically unstable, okay, where LA clot status is not known. Should we go ahead with the emergency sync cardioversion? You can't go ahead with the emergency sync cardioversion if you don't know the LA clot, but if the patient is hemodynamically unstable, then benefit of doubt, you have to go ahead with a DC cardioversion. There is no proven role of megvilitin in the patient with a supraventricular tachycardia. The role of megvilitin has been established only, what couple of slides I have just shown, only in the patient of ventricular tachycardia. Answered no role in the SVT patient. And if you don't know the status of the LA clot in the patient with the AF with a fast ventricular rate, and if the patient is hemodynamically unstable, then you have to go ahead with a DC cardioversion with a due risk explained to the patient.
Any other questions if we have? Otherwise, can we conclude with this session?
I think we can conclude. There is nothing in the chat box as of now.
Sure, sir. So thank you so much, Dr. Chetan, for joining us today. It was really an insightful discussion, sir, for us as well as our listeners. And I would also like to thank all the participants for joining us, for being with us, and for their active participation during the whole session. Thank you and have a good day, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the nice question from Dr. Parag, sir. I tried to answer as much as possible from my end. Definitely, this is a very good molecule to go ahead, not as a first line of treatment to start in the patient of ventricular tachycardia, but gradually when you have to up titrate and you have to change the medication and you have to add on the other molecule, like in addition to Cordron, you have to add the beta blocker and the other drugs. The megvilitin is really effective. Once you are habitual with the megvilitin, you will prefer the megvilitin over the other molecule. That's for sure. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.